The Leica M6, a legend, an icon. I dreamed of owning one for years, a camera built for the streets, made to capture raw emotions and fleeting moments. But is it all hype? After nearly a year and 50 rolls of film, these are my thoughts. Did it live up to my expectations? Did it actually make me a better street photographer? Let's find out. In May of 2024, I became a film street photographer after years of wanting to venture into film street photography and, to be honest, have an excuse to buy a Leica camera. So now that I have the Leica M6 for almost a year and I put more than 50 rolls through it, I have a few things I want to share. So I'll be talking about the M6 from different perspectives. I'll talk a little bit about the specs that I like, how I use the camera, and what the M6 has taught me as a street photographer. Let me tell you about my setup. So I have the Leica M6, the reissue from 2022. I have two manual lenses for it. Both of them are from Voigtlander. So the first one is the 28mm f2 Ultron. The second one is the 50mm f2.2 color scope bar. So let's talk about it. I just quickly want to introduce myself. My name is Embreen, aka Hipster in Copenhagen. So if you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. I just quickly want to tell you about my website where I have a newsletter, blog, and I also have free complimentary downloads. So check it out. There might be something for you there. All right, so let's jump back to the video. Let's talk about being a first-time Leica owner and the rangefinder user experience. So what I really like about this camera is the very simple layout of the camera. So almost a bare bones layout. You have the shutter dial, you have the advance lever, and then the ISO dial here at the back, and also a small frame counter and the rewind knob. And basically this is the entire layout of the camera. And this is just really cool when you go out and do street photography because you don't need anything else. You just have the basics to make a photograph. So that's actually one of the things that I really come to appreciate with this mechanical camera. I think we can all agree to this camera is very well made and beautiful to look at. It's built like a tank and has a little bit of heft to it. However, this camera is not the most ergonomically designed camera. And after owning this camera for almost a year, I would say that I miss a hand grip on this because on my Fuji X100V, I can just put on an external hand grip, so I have a little bit more grip. So right now, when I go out, I have literally nothing to hold on to. And what happened in the beginning when I got this camera for the first couple of months was that I just held on for dear life, and I think I clenched my fingers and my hand so tight that I ended up fatiguing my hand and my fingers. It took some getting used to having this camera in my hand for prolonged periods of time. But now, almost a year after, I would say this is not an issue anymore, but this is something you need to be aware of and also need to get used to. I just want to ask you something real quick. Are you new to street photography and struggling with the basics? Getting started can feel overwhelming. It definitely was for me when I started street photography over 9 years ago. I struggled with camera settings, figuring out how to shoot, and getting past the fear of being out there on the streets. I believe it's not just about talent or confidence, it's about curiosity. That's why I created a 60-minute street photography essentials mini course, a simple, focused guide that gives you the essentials you need to start shooting without overcomplicating things. If any of this resonates with you, this mini course might be for you. Use the link below to access it on my website. Alright, let's get back to the video. In one of my other videos, I talked about the theme of 2025 being less is more when it comes to street photography and only carrying the essentials. So for the past 2 years, I've shifted towards having a much more simple setup when it comes to street photography. And this trend actually started with my Fuji X100V because of its compact size and the fixed focal length. And slowly I got used to having that convenience of having that simple setup because I could just take my camera everywhere or anywhere I wanted to. I didn't have to think about packing a camera bag and carrying different filters or accessories. And also particularly the Fuji X100V has a lot of features. So for example, it has an inbuilt ND filter, it has a flash and so forth. And really it made it so much more convenient to just have the camera with me. And since I bought the Leica M6, I just continue with the simple setup as well because the Leica M6 is both small and compact, and it allowed me to stay true to that mindset of having only the essentials when I'm doing street photography. Before I bought the Leica M6, my main EDC camera was the Fuji X100V. So to be honest, I haven't missed using any other camera than the M6, and I have a few cameras I can use. And also I've gotten so used to having the Leica M6 as my new main EDC, and it's been almost the same process as I described before with the Fuji X100V. It's so convenient. I don't need to think about having a lot of gear with me or accessories, and the compact and the simple setup and the whole entire footprint of it. The only thing I do carry with me are extra rolls of film, because I learned it the hard way that I always need to have extra spare rolls of film, because you never know when inspiration is going to strike. But there are a few times I've used the Fuji X100V, and I still do enjoy using my digital cameras. But the few times I've used it is because when I wanted to go out and do street photography, it was very overcast. I had a roll of film with a very low ISO, so I couldn't really use that. The photographs wouldn't be that great. So I just used my digital camera. But the only times I haven't used my camera properly as a main EDC is when I'm traveling. So earlier this year, I traveled for work where I had shorter business trips. To be honest, I couldn't bring my camera because it was just too much of a hassle going through airport security and just also bringing a lot of film rolls because I didn't know how much I was going to shoot. So the convenience of having a digital camera was just outweighing having an analog camera. But I'm hoping on my upcoming private trips I can bring my Leica M6 and getting used to and shake off that nervousness I have of traveling with my M6. Leica is almost synonymous with street photography itself, so if you look at some of the photographs made by the great street photographers of our time, it's probably made with a Leica. I specifically bought the Leica M6 for the sole purpose of doing street photography with it. And of course you can do all types of photography, but I also wanted that film experience that I mentioned in the beginning. And also for the past 2 years, I slowly shifted my shooting style. So back in the day, I started out doing night street photography and I really loved it. And I can't tell you how many hours I spent out on the streets dead at night. Since then, I slowly pivoted towards day street photography and also doing more candid street photography because I wanted those more raw, authentic type of photographs. For that purpose, I would say the Leica M6 for me is the perfect camera. I believe it's the ultimate street photography camera, but that's just my opinion. The true strength of an M camera like the M6 is that it's a rangefinder camera, and I will briefly be talking about frame lines and zone focus and how those things change the game for me as a street photographer. When doing street photography, speed and accuracy is really important to me as a street photographer because when I'm out there on the streets and it's really fast paced, it can really help speed up the process and make a photograph. That's why I really like frame lines, because they help me and guide me as a photographer to set up a frame or composition that I want. But I believe the true strength of frame lines is that you can see beyond the frame. And that means that you can see outside the scene or outside the frame that you're trying to capture. And you can perfectly time it if you want a subject entering your frame. So for me, that has been a little bit of a game changer because I don't have to just snap a lot of photos. I don't have to anticipate. I can actually see what's going on in real time, so to say. But in all fairness, it took some getting used to. But now that I've been using that for a year, I can't imagine not having the frame lines to help and guide me. Combining frame lines with using zone focus has been ideal for me and the type of street photography I like to do because essentially my camera is pre-focused and I don't need to think about settings every time I make a photograph. But using zone focus is not where you have critical focus. The focus is rapid and is accurate enough most of the time. But if I want to achieve critical focus that I do sometimes, then I would take the time to slow down and get that correct focus to make a photograph pin sharp. But most of the time, I would say more than 90% of the time, zone focus is more than enough for the focus in my photographs. They're not out of focus, but they're not super critically sharp. One of the trade-offs you have to be aware of when using zone focus. But if you're within that set distance, I think you're good to go. I won't talk more about it because it's a huge topic, but you can do your own research and figure out more about zone focus and why some people say it's much faster than autofocus. But for this video, I think I'll leave it here. There are a few downsides to using a rangefinder. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. And even though I've been enjoying the rangefinder experience for the past year, I would say it's very powerful when it comes to wider focal lengths. So like the 28, 35, 50, or even up to 75 millimeter. But beyond that, so the longer focal lengths, it becomes increasingly difficult to focus and compose a photograph. And maybe that's why a lot of landscape photographers don't use a rangefinder camera. But looking back at my own experience using a rangefinder for the past year, it took some time and effort to really understand how to use a rangefinder. But also it helped me understand where I had to put in the effort to really elevate my skills, because coming from using a digital camera, I didn't know where I had weaknesses, so to say, where I had to elevate my skills even more. And using the rangefinder for the past year, I really believe that it has helped me grow and become better as a street photographer. Let's talk about some of the things the M6 and shooting film has taught me as a street photographer. So first and foremost, I would say I have rediscovered street photography in a few different ways. So I've been doing street photography for almost a decade, and I thought I've seen everything, I've learned everything, but I couldn't be more wrong, because especially in street photography, there's always room to improve, there's always room to learn some more. Staying true to that, I actually discovered that I had to relearn street photography in a whole different way. So coming from a digital street photography background and only shooting digital, I didn't have a lot of the convenience you have, because film is so much different than digital. It's about having different attitude, it's your outlook on doing street photography, it's a different mindset you have when you're going out there on the streets. And also it taught me to slow down. It slowed down my process when I'm shooting film, and it's actually came naturally because I was learning how to handle my camera. I had to relearn exposure triangle and how that works with film conditions. I also started to enjoy film photography so much more, and just having a simple camera. So I talked about having a very simple bare bones layout of the camera. It really helped me to focus on street photography and what I was seeing out there instead of just playing with the settings. And lastly, I would mention that instant gratification that you have with digital camera that is so convenient. That just went away also. I'm one of those street photographers who check their photographs right after they make them, because it's just like a compulsion. I have to check it. And shooting analog, I didn't have that. I couldn't get that instant gratification, so I have to wait until my role is developed. And that also talks into having a more slowed down or more thoughtful process, because I'm much more intentional with my photography and the way I make photographs. So I try to make a composition as correct in camera as possible. And also it's fun to look back at your photograph when they're developed to see if you actually made a good photograph or not. I also mentioned previously that my shooting style has changed, so I do different kind of street photography now. I think that's a natural process after doing something for such a long time. It's natural to pivot towards something different. And for me, it just happened to be day street photography right now. So I'm thoroughly enjoying that, and I'm thoroughly enjoying using the Leica M6 as a tool for that. One of the things I underestimated venturing into film street photography, and specifically buying a mechanical camera like the M6, was that I didn't account for all the decisions I had to make all the time making a photograph. So let me explain. So the Leica M6 is a fully mechanical camera. That means that I am in full control of the settings. I have to make the decisions all the time. And when you're doing street photography where things are happening quite fast and you're trying to capture a moment that is just gone the next second, it's a lot of decision to make, and you have to be on top of your decision making. Being a newbie film street photographer, that actually was a little bit hard in the beginning until I started to handle my camera. In the long run, I think it has benefited me to learn that process, to quickly be able to decide which settings I will be using. So it forced me also to become more creative in terms of how I make a photograph, and not always rushing that process, because sometimes in the past I would just rush through things. I would just snap. I could snap a lot of photos. Now I'm more intentional of how I make a photograph, which settings I use, and I try to make a photograph as correct in camera as possible. Let's talk about the $6,800 question. So has the Leica M6 been worth it for me? And being a street photographer for almost a decade and using the M6 for almost a year and putting more than 50 rolls through it, I would say yes, it has been absolutely worth it for me as a street photographer. And I talk about it in another video why I bought the M6, because I was at a crossroad. I wanted to shake up my street photography. I felt bored. I wanted something different. I wanted it to change. For me, yes, the money has been worth it, because it's not about just owning a new camera. It has given me so much more on different levels. So for me as a street photographer, after 10 years, you become a little bit complacent. You think you learned everything, you've seen everything. The biggest lesson I learned with this camera has been that I had to rediscover street photography entirely. I had to relearn street photography, something that I actually pride myself in saying that I can do street photography quite well. but it actually humbled me also. So for me, it has absolutely been worth it. And I think I'm just at the start of my journey being a film street photographer. And I cannot wait to make a video like this in 5 years' time and see how far I've come. All right, I'll see you on the next one.